The neon sign flickered like a dying heartbeat outside the dusty roadside bar, casting erratic shadows across the cracked asphalt of Route 17. It was just past midnight in the heart of nowhere, the kind of place where truckers nursed regrets and wanderers chased ghosts. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of stale beer and worn leather, the jukebox humming a forgotten country tune about lost highways. Behind the scarred oak counter stood Nathan, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, his hands calloused from years of pouring dreams into glasses. He'd seen every flavor of sorrow walk through those doors, divorce papers crumpled in pockets, tattoos hiding bullet scars, but tonight something felt different. The door creaked open, and in stumbled a lone figure, his silhouette framed by the moon's pale glow. Ethan collapsed onto a stool at the far end of the bar, his leather vest patched with the faded emblem of the Iron Vipers, a coiled serpent that spoke of brotherhood forged in fire. He was a ghost of a man, mid-30s, with eyes hollowed by storms no one else could see. His boots, caked in desert dust, left faint trails on the floorboards as he shrugged off his helmet, revealing a jagged scar snaking down his temple. The bar was empty, save for a couple of locals nursing whiskies in the corner, their murmurs fading into the background. Ethan didn't speak. He just stared at the scarred wood before him, fingers tracing invisible patterns, as if unraveling a thread from his past. Nathan watched from the corner of his eye, wiping a glass with deliberate slowness. He'd poured for men like this before, veterans carrying the weight of unspoken wars, brothers who'd lost their way. But Ethan's silence screamed louder than any rant. Sliding a tumbler of bourbon across the counter, no charge, no questions, Nathan leaned in just enough to break the ice. "Rough road tonight." The words hung in the dim light, simple as a lifeline tossed into dark waters. Ethan glanced up, surprise flickering in his gaze like a spark in dry tinder. He took the glass, the amber liquid catching the low-hanging bulb overhead, and for a moment the bar seemed to hold its breath. The bourbon burned smooth down his throat, chasing away the chill of the ride. "You have no idea," Ethan muttered finally, his voice gravelly, laced with the echo of engines long silenced. Nathan nodded, refilling the glass without a word. It was a gesture born of quiet empathy, the kind that didn't demand stories, but invited them. In a world of quick transactions and colder hearts, this was currency Ethan hadn't expected, kindness without strings. As the night deepened, the locals trickled out, leaving the two men in a cocoon of flickering light and soft jazz from the jukebox. Ethan began to talk, words spilling like rain on parched earth. It started with the basics. A long haul from the Arizona Badlands, the endless ribbon of highway blurring into memories. But then the cracks appeared. He spoke of a promise made decades ago, under a blood-red sunset, to a brother in arms named Marcus. They were young then, fresh from the sands of forgotten conflicts, binding their fates with oaths etched in ink and sweat. The Iron Vipers weren't just a club. They were a vow, a family chosen when blood ties had failed. Marcus had been the glue, the one who pulled Ethan from the brink after a roadside ambush, left him scarred and doubting. "We swore we'd always ride for each other," Ethan said, his voice dropping to a whisper as he swirled the bourbon. "No matter the miles, no matter the cost." Nathan listened, his face a mask of steady calm, but inside, echoes stirred. He'd lost his own brother to the bottle years back, watched him fade in a haze of bad choices and worse luck. Pouring free drinks wasn't charity. It was restitution, a small defiance against the loneliness that clawed at men like them. As Ethan unburdened himself, the story unfolded in fragments. Marcus, now a shadow of himself, holed up in a crumbling motel on the outskirts of town, battling demons that no engine's roar could outrun, debts piling like storm clouds, whispers of shady deals with men who traded in fear rather than honor. Ethan had ridden alone to check on him, only to find the door barred and silence thicker than fog. "I can't leave him like this," Ethan confessed, his fist clenching around the glass. "But the club's scattered now. Life pulls us apart. What good is a promise if no one's there to keep it?" The clock ticked toward 2 a.m., the bar's windows fogged with the night's breath. Nathan set down a plate of greasy fries on the house again and met Ethan's eyes. "Sometimes the road brings you exactly where you need to be. You tell that brother of yours you're not riding solo anymore." It was a spark, simple words igniting something dormant in Ethan's chest. He nodded, the weight lifting just a fraction, as if the bourbon and the listening ear had oiled the rusted gears of resolve. Outside, Ethan's bike gleamed under the stars, a faithful steed waiting for the call to thunder. He stood, clapping Nathan on the shoulder with a grip that spoke volumes. "Thanks, man, for seeing what others miss." Nathan watched him go, the door swinging shut behind him, the roar of the engine fading into the desert night. But as the bar emptied into silence, Nathan felt a pull he couldn't shake. He'd given more than drinks tonight. He'd given a piece of his own guarded heart. Little did he know, Ethan's words had already rippled outward, a signal flare in the dark, far across the state lines. Cell phones buzzed in the dead of night. Messages from a lone viper summoning the pack. Engines would stir at dawn, headlights piercing the veil, converging on a point of honor that demanded reckoning. What started as a quiet act of compassion in a forgotten bar was about to unleash a tide of loyalty, one that would crash through walls of isolation and despair. For Ethan, it was the rekindling of a vow long buried. For Nathan, it would be a revelation that true brotherhood recognized its own, even in strangers. The highway stretched endless, but promises like these bent time itself, drawing the lost back into the fold. The first light of dawn crept over the jagged horizon like a hesitant promise, painting the sky in streaks of bruised purple and gold. Ethan throttled his Harley down the empty stretch of Route 17, the engine's growl a steady pulse against the chill morning air. Wind whipped at his face, carrying the faint tang of sagebrush and distant rain, but his mind was miles ahead, back at that crumbling motel where Marcus waited, trapped in a cage of his own making. The free bourbon from the bartender still warmed his veins, a quiet fuel that sharpened his resolve. He pulled over at a roadside payphone, the relic standing sentinel amid tumbleweeds, and fished out his cell. One call. That's all it would take to awaken the vipers. Across the state, in a ramshackle garage bathed in the hum of fluorescent lights, James stirred from a fitful sleep on a cot amid scattered tools and oil stains. The phone buzzed like an angry hornet on the workbench, its screen glowing with Ethan's name. James, broad and weathered at 42, with a salt and pepper beard framing eyes that had seen too many sunsets alone, snatched it up. "Talk to me," he rasped, voice thick with the remnants of night. Ethan's words came fast, clipped by the wind. Marcus was in deep. Sharks circling a rundown motel. Debts twisted into threats that reeked of broken trust. "He's family, James. The promise we made. It's time." James paused, the weight of old oaths settling like dust on his shoulders. He'd ridden with Marcus through sandstorms and silence, back when the vipers were more than patches on leather. They were lifelines. Without a word, he killed the call and fired up his bike. The roar echoing off the corrugated walls like a battle cry. Gears shifted, and he was gone, headlights slicing the pre-dawn gloom. Word spread like wildfire through parched grass. In a quiet suburb on the edge of the Badlands, Daniel hunched over a kitchen table, steam rising from a mug of black coffee that did little to chase the shadows under his eyes. A former mechanic turned family man, he'd traded the club's thunder for PTA meetings and scraped knees, but the vibration of his phone pulled him back. Ethan's message was simple: coordinates to the motel, a reminder of the ink on their arms, the serpent coiling around a shield etched with ride or die. Daniel glanced at the photo on the fridge, his wife and kids smiling under a summer sky. Then at the vest hanging in the closet, faded but unbroken. He kissed his sleeping family's foreheads, the scent of laundry soap lingering, and slipped out into the garage. The engine caught with a familiar snarl, and as he rolled down the driveway, the first rays caught the chrome, flashing like a beacon. By the time the sun crested fully, a convoy was forming at a dusty pull-off 20 miles from the motel. Engines idled in a low symphony, exhaust curling like smoke signals into the crisp air. 20 bikes at first, then 30, riders converging from hidden trails and forgotten towns, veterans with stories carved into their skin, each one answering the unspoken summons. Alexander arrived last, his massive frame dwarfing the custom chopper that purred beneath him. He'd been the enforcer once, fists as quick as his loyalty, but a bad fall had sidelined him to a life of quiet repairs in a mountain cabin. Ethan's voice on the line had cracked something open. "Marcus needs us, all of us." Alexander nodded to the gathering brothers, clasping hands in grips that spoke of battles shared and scars earned. No speeches, just the creak of leather and the metallic tang of anticipation. They were the iron vipers, bound not by blood, but by vows that time couldn't erode. Ethan led the pack, his scar throbbing faintly in the rising heat as they thundered toward the motel. The road blurred beneath them, asphalt humming with purpose. The collective roar drowning out the doubts that nipped at his heels. What if Marcus had changed too much? What if the promise was just echoes now? But the sight in his mirrors, headlights strung like pearls in the dust, pushed those thoughts aside. This was redemption in motion, a tide turning against the isolation that had nearly claimed them all. The motel loomed ahead, a sagging relic of faded dreams, its neon vacancy sign flickering weakly even in daylight. Paint peeled from the walls like old wounds, and the parking lot held a lone sedan that screamed trouble, sleek, out of place, with tinted windows hiding watchful eyes. Ethan signaled a halt at the edge of the lot, the convoy fanning out in a wall of chrome and resolve. Silence fell, broken only by the tick of cooling engines and the distant cry of a hawk wheeling overhead. Marcus's room was at the end, door ajar, shadows shifting within like ghosts stirring. They dismounted as one, boots crunching gravel, a phalanx of quiet strength. Ethan approached first, heart pounding against his ribs, the air thick with the scent of mildew and fear. He knocked once, the sound sharp as a gunshot in the stillness. "Marcus, it's me, we're here." A shuffle from inside, then the door creaked wider. There stood Marcus, gaunt and hollow-cheeked, his viper patch frayed on a shirt that hung loose. His eyes, once sharp as switchblades, widened at the sight of the brothers arrayed behind Ethan. James with his steady gaze, Daniel's quiet nod, Alexander's unyielding presence. You came," Marcus whispered, voice breaking like dry earth under rain. The reunion was raw, hands clasping shoulders, words tumbling in low tones. Marcus confessed it all, the debts from a bad investment gone sour, the loan sharks who'd twisted his desperation into a noose. They'd cornered him last night, demands laced with threats that chilled the blood. But now, with the vipers at his back, the fear ebbed. "I thought I'd lost this," Marcus said, gesturing to the group, tears carving tracks through the grime on his face. Ethan pulled him into a bear hug, the leather of their vests pressing like armor. "Promises don't die easy, brother." As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the lot, the sedan peeled out, tires screeching in retreat. The sharks had seen the convoy, sensed the unbreakable line of loyalty, and slunk away without a fight. It wasn't violence that won the day. It was the simple, unyielding truth of men who rode for their own. Marcus straightened, the weight lifting, and for the first time in years, a spark of the old fire returned to his eyes. Word of the standoff rippled back to the bar, carried on the wind of a single phone call from Ethan. Nathan, wiping down the counter in the midday lull, felt his chest tighten as the story unfolded. He'd given drinks to a stranger, but in return he'd witnessed the rebirth of something sacred, a brotherhood that turned whispers into thunder. Tears welled unbidden, blurring the neon's glow, as he realized his small act had ignited a chain that mended what was broken. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The afternoon sun beat down on the bar like a relentless interrogator, turning the air inside thick and golden through the half-drawn blinds. Nathan moved on autopilot, restocking bottles with mechanical precision, but his thoughts churned like dust devils in the desert wind. The phone call from Ethan had ended just minutes ago, the biker's voice crackling with gratitude over the line. "You started this, Nathan. The Vipers. We owe you. Marcus is pulling himself together because of what you did." Nathan had mumbled something about it being nothing, just a couple of drinks, but the words felt hollow even to him. He sank onto a stool behind the counter, the wood groaning under his weight, and stared at the empty glass Ethan had left behind. A faint ring of bourbon stained the rim, a silent testament to the night that had unraveled everything. Outside, the highway hummed with sporadic traffic, trucks rumbling past like distant thunder, but inside, the silence pressed in, broken only by the drip of a leaky faucet. Nathan's mind replayed the fragments Ethan had shared during their talk. The wars that scarred more than skin, the brothers who'd become lifelines when family had fractured. He'd nodded along then, hiding his own ghosts behind a bartender's smile, but now, alone with the echo of that call, the barriers crumbled. His brother Caleb, gone 5 years now, lost to the same shadows Marcus had danced with. Caleb had washed up in places like this, chasing highs that promised escape but delivered chains. Nathan had tried to pull him back, pouring coffee instead of liquor, offering rides home on quiet nights. But promises whispered in the dark couldn't compete with the pull of despair. Caleb's last words, slurred over a payphone. "I'll be fine, Nate. Just need one more ride." He never made it. A shadow fell across the doorway, snapping Nathan from his reverie. The door swung open with a familiar creak, and in walked a woman in her early 30s. Her dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail, eyes sharp and assessing like a hawk scanning the horizon. She wore a simple denim jacket over scrubs, the faint scent of antiseptic clinging to her like a second skin. "You Nathan?" she asked, sliding onto the stool Ethan had vacated the night before. Her voice carried the no-nonsense edge of someone who'd seen too much in emergency rooms and too little hope in the aftermath. Nathan nodded, wiping his hands on a rag, curiosity flickering amid the ache in his chest. "I'm Sophia, nurse at the county clinic down the road. Ethan called ahead, said you might need to talk." Nathan poured her a soda without asking, the fizz cutting through the heavy air like a spark. She accepted it with a nod, her fingers drumming lightly on the glass. "He didn't say much, just that you gave him more than a drink last night. Sounded like you get it, the weight some folks carry." Sophia's gaze softened, tracing the lines etched into Nathan's face, the subtle hunch of shoulders that spoke of burdens lifted alone for too long. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur. "Marcus, Ethan's friend, he's one of ours now. Came in this morning after that. Gathering at the motel. Bruised up, but nothing broken. Said his brothers showed up like a storm, scared off the trouble without a fist thrown. It's rare, you know, men like that, holding to old codes when the world's gone soft." As she spoke, the pieces connected in Nathan's mind. painting a vivid scene, the convoy rolling in, engines a chorus of defiance, faces set in quiet determination under the motel's peeling eaves. He could almost hear the gravel crunch under boots, smell the mix of exhaust and resolve hanging in the lot. Sophia continued, her words weaving the emotional thread tighter. Marcus talked about you too, how Ethan came in here broken, left with fire in his eyes. Said it reminded him of a promise they all made, something about riding for the lost ones, no questions asked. Nathan's throat tightened, the rag twisting in his grip. He'd never been part of a circle like that, just a solitary sentinel in a bar that swallowed stories whole. But hearing it now, from this stranger with kind eyes, stirred something dormant, a longing for the family he'd pieced together from fragments of lost souls. The door burst open again, this time with the low rumble of multiple engines idling outside. Nathan's pulse quickened as a group of riders dismounted, their silhouettes filling the frame like extras in a redemption reel. Ethan led them, Marcus at his side, the latter looking steadier on his feet, colour returning to his cheeks. James, Daniel and Alexander followed, vests gleaming in the sunlight, a few more Vipers bringing up the rear. 8 in all, a tight-knit phalanx that turned the bar's dim interior into a sanctuary of leather and loyalty. They filed in quietly, boots thudding softly, the air shifting with the scent of road dust and brotherhood. No fanfare, just nods and murmurs as they claimed stools along the counter. Ethan clapped Nathan on the back, his scar catching the light like a badge of survival. "Told you we'd come back. This is for you, man." Marcus stepped forward, extending a hand that Nathan took, feeling the calluses mirror his own. "Ethan said you listened when no one else would, gave him the push to call us. We wouldn't be standing here without that." The words hung, simple yet profound, as the group raised glasses, bourbon for some, sodas for others, in a toast that rippled through the room. Sophia watched from her perch, a small smile playing on her lips, her presence a quiet anchor in the unfolding scene. As the afternoon wore on, stories flowed like the drinks Nathan poured, free and unreserved. Laughter mixed with the gravity of shared pains, tales of deployments that left invisible wounds, homecomings that shattered illusions, the quiet victories of pulling one another from the edge. Nathan found himself opening up, words tumbling about Caleb, the brother he'd failed to save. The Vipers listened, their faces a gallery of empathy. No judgments, just the steady rhythm of heads nodding in understanding. Alexander, the big man with a voice like gravel, shared his own loss. A comrade felled in a dusty skirmish, a promise to carry the torch that had kept him riding. "We choose our kin," he said, eyes locking with Nathan's. "Blood don't always count." Tears pricked at Nathan's eyes then, unbidden and hot, tracing paths down his weathered cheeks. It wasn't sorrow alone, but a release, the realization that his small act had woven him into this tapestry of honor. The brothers encircled him, hands on shoulders, a circle of quiet strength that mended cracks he hadn't known were there. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that danced with the promise of new roads. Marcus leaned in last, whispering, "You're one of us now, if you'll have it." The Vipers ride for their own, including the ones who serve the drinks that start the fire. As the group lingered into the golden hour, engines eventually stirring for the next leg of their journey, Nathan wiped his face with the back of his hand, a smile breaking through. The bar felt fuller, warmer, the neon sign outside flickering back to life with renewed vigor. What had begun as a lonely pour in the dead of night had bloomed into a legacy of loyalty, proving that even in the cynical sprawl of forgotten roots, one act of kindness could summon a thunder that healed the deepest wounds. The highway called, but for the first time Nathan felt ready to answer. Not alone, But with brothers at his side, the evening shadows stretched long across the bar's worn floorboards, turning the golden hues of afternoon into a tapestry of amber and indigo. Nathan stood behind the counter, the rag in his hand forgotten, as he watched the iron vipers file out one by one, their boots echoing like fading heartbeats. The air still hummed with the residue of their presence, the faint bite of exhaust mingling with the warmth of shared stories, the low murmur of laughter that had chased away the ghosts. Marcus lingered last, clapping Nathan on the shoulder with a grip that lingered, eyes gleaming with the fragile spark of renewed purpose. "We'll be back through, brother. Roads like these always circle." Ethan nodded from the doorway, his scar a silver thread in the dimming light, before the engines roared to life outside, a symphony that vibrated through the walls and into Nathan's bones. Alone again, Nathan flipped the closed sign with a soft click, the neon buzz outside the window the only company left. He sank onto a stool, the wood creaking under him like an old friend offering solace. The tears from earlier had dried, leaving salt tracks on his cheeks, but the ache in his chest was a different beast, sweet and sharp, like the first rain after drought. For years, this bar had been his fortress and his prison, a place where he mended strangers' wounds with whiskey and wisdom, all while his own festered untouched. Caleb's shadow had loomed largest, a promise unkept that gnawed at him in quiet hours. But tonight, the vipers had cracked that open, not with force, but with the quiet power of inclusion. "You're one of us," Alexander had said, and the words echoed now, wrapping around Nathan like the leather of a vest he didn't yet own. He poured himself a measure of bourbon, the same brand he'd given Ethan, watching the liquid swirl like memories in the glass. The first sip burned clean, chasing the day's dust from his throat. Outside, the highway whispered secrets to the wind, taillights fading into the twilight like fireflies scattering. Nathan's mind drifted to Sophia, the nurse who'd appeared like a bridge between worlds. Her soda glass still sat on the counter, half empty, a faint fizz lingering on the rim. She'd slipped out with the group, promising to check on Marcus at the clinic, her ponytail swaying as she waved goodbye. In her eyes, Nathan had seen a reflection of his own guarded hope, someone who'd patched up bodies but longed to heal the unseen scars. Perhaps she'd return, or perhaps this was just another ripple in the pond. But for now the bar felt less empty, the silence less oppressive. A low rumble pulled him from his thoughts, growing into the unmistakable growl of a single engine approaching. Nathan straightened, peering through the blinds as a lone bike pulled up, its chrome catching the last glints of sunset. The rider dismounted with deliberate slowness, helmet tucked under one arm, revealing a face etched with quiet determination. It was James, the salt-and-pepper bearded viper who'd answered Ethan's call from that ramshackle garage. He pushed through the door, the bell tinkling softly, and scanned the room before settling on Nathan with a nod. "Mind if I come in? Got something for you." His voice was steady, laced with the gravel of long rides and longer nights, carrying the faint scent of oil and open road. Nathan unlocked the door, gesturing to a stool. "Bar's closed, but for you, always open." He poured 2 glasses without asking, the bourbon glinting under the low bulb like liquid gold. James accepted his with a murmur of thanks, his broad hands wrapping around it as if anchoring himself. They sat in companionable quiet at first, the jukebox humming a soft melody about wandering souls. Then James spoke, his words measured, painting pictures with the precision of a man who'd stared down horizons. "Ethan filled me in on the ride back. About your brother, Caleb, right? Sounds like he was the kind who rode hard, loved harder." Nathan's grip tightened on his glass, the cool surface grounding him against the surge of memory. He nodded, voice low, tried to keep him from the edge, poured him sodas, talked him down, but promises, they slip sometimes. James leaned back, the stool creaking, his eyes distant as if tracing invisible maps. We all carry those slips. Me. Lost a kid sister to the same pool. Thought I could fix it with enough miles between us and the trouble. Rode out after her funeral. Ended up with the Vipers by accident. They didn't fix me, but they gave me a way to keep riding for the ones who couldn't. He pulled a small leather pouch from his vest, sliding it across the counter. Inside, nestled against faded patches, was a viper emblem. Simple. Coiled serpent on a shield, threads worn but strong. Not official yet, that's for the whole crew to vote on, but Ethan says you're in. Wear it when you're ready, means you ride with us, even if it's just behind this bar. Nathan's fingers trembled as he touched the patch, the leather cool and alive under his skin. It wasn't just fabric, it was a vow, an extension of the promises that had bound these men through fire and fade. Tears welled again, hot and unashamed, blurring the emblem into a symbol of absolution. James watched, silent respect in his gaze, the air between them thick with unspoken understanding. No pity, just the raw truth of men forging family from fractures. Caleb would have liked this, Nathan whispered finally, voice cracking like gravel under tires, a circle that doesn't break. As night fully claimed the sky, stars pricking through the velvet dark, James stood, clasping Nathan's forearm in a grip that sealed the moment. We'll send word when we ride next. Desert rally in a couple weeks. Neutral ground, stories and straight roads. Bring Sophia if she wants in. We could use more steady hands. At the door swung shut behind him, engine fading into the chorus of crickets, leaving Nathan with the patch clutched in his fist. He hung it on a hook behind the bar, right beside the old photo of Caleb grinning beside a beat-up bike. The two brothers arm in arm under an endless blue. The bar's clock ticked onward, marking the shift from one life to another. Nathan wiped his eyes, a quiet smile breaking through as he imagined the roads ahead. Not solitary anymore, but lined with brothers who'd turned a free drink into a lifeline. In the world of cynics and shortcuts, this was the real thunder, loyalty that roared back to life, mending what time had torn. The neon flickered on, casting its glow over the emblem, a beacon for whatever dawn brought next. If this chapter moved you, please hit that like button. It helps spread these stories of quiet courage to more hearts in need. The moon hung low over Route 17 like a silver medallion, casting a pale sheen across the bar's gravel lot as Nathan locked up for the night. The patch from James weighed heavy in his pocket, a talisman against the chill that seeped through his jacket. He paused at the threshold, keys jingling softly, and glanced back at the dimly lit interior, where shadows danced over the scarred counter. The photo of Caleb caught the faint glow from the neon sign, his brother's grin frozen in time, eyes alight with the reckless joy of youth. Nathan's hand brushed the frame, a silent vow forming in the quiet. This time, he'd ride the promises through to the end. The engine of his old pickup coughed to life, headlights slicing the darkness as he pulled onto the highway, the road unspooling like a thread pulling him toward an uncertain dawn. Miles blurred into a hypnotic rhythm, the dashboard clock ticking past midnight, the radio murmuring static-laced ballads about outlaws and second chances. Nathan's mind wandered to the Vipers, their faces etched with the same quiet resolve he'd seen in Caleb before the fall. Ethan, with his haunted scar, Marcus, fragile but unbowed, James, the steady anchor, and Sophia, her presence a soft counterpoint, like the calm after a storm's roar. He'd caught her number scribbled on a napkin before she left, a casual, in case you need a checkup that felt like more. Now, as the desert stretched endless on either side, wind whistling through the cracked window carrying the scent of creosote and cool earth, Nathan felt the pull of something larger than solitude. The patch burned against his thigh, urging him forward. By the time he reached the outskirts of town, the first hints of false dawn tinged the horizon, turning the sky to a bruised lavender. His trailer sat squat and unassuming amid a cluster of similar homes, porch light flickering like a weary sentinel. Nathan killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the crunch of his boots on the dry path. Inside, the air was stale, laced with the faint must of disuse. Takeout containers on the counter. A half-read book on the nightstand about lost brothers in wartime. He shrugged off his jacket, the patch tumbling onto the table, catching the lamplight in a gleam of coiled serpent. Staring at it, Nathan's resolve hardened. Tomorrow, he'd call Ethan. No more pouring from behind barriers. It was time to step into the thunder. Sleep came fitful, dreams weaving fragments of engines and echoes, Caleb's laughter mingling with the growl of Harley's, promises sworn under starlit skies. He woke to the insistent buzz of his phone, sunlight slanting through the blinds in golden shafts that warmed the linoleum floor. The screen glowed with an unknown number, but the area code whispered familiarity. Nathan, it's Sophia from the bar. Her voice was clear, edged with urgency that cut through the morning haze. He sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes, the scent of coffee brewing automatically in the pot filling the small space. Heard from Marcus this morning. He's stable, but there's talk. Those loan sharks didn't just slink away. Word is they're regrouping, whispering about making an example. The Vipers are calling a meet at the old Crossroads diner, neutral ground, noon sharp. Ethan said to invite you, said you're part of this now. Nathan's pulse quickened, the patch on the table seeming to pulse with its own life. He glanced at the clock, barely 8, and felt the familiar tug of doubt, the old instinct to pour another drink and let the world spin on without him. But Caleb's photo on the wall stared back, a reminder of promises left to rust. "I'll be there," he said, the words tasting like commitment on his tongue. Sophia's relief was palpable, a soft exhale over the line. "Good. Bring that steady hand of yours. See you soon." The call ended, leaving Nathan in the quiet hum of his trailer, the coffee's aroma sharpening his senses. He dressed quickly, jeans worn soft from years behind the bar, a plain shirt that hid the scars of his own unspoken battles, and pinned the patch to his jacket with trembling fingers. It fit like it had always belonged, the serpent coiling protectively over his heart. The drive to the diner wound through scrubland, dotted with Joshua trees, their twisted limbs reaching like silent witnesses. Dust devils swirled in the rear view, playful harbingers of the gathering storm. By the time Nathan pulled into the lot, the sun beat down mercilessly, turning the asphalt to a shimmering haze. Bikes lined the perimeter like iron guardians, chrome glinting under the midday glare, engines cooling with metallic ticks. The Vipers were already there, Ethan leaning against his Harley, arms crossed, scar stark in the harsh light, Marcus beside him, a fresh bandage peeking from his sleeve, but stance firmer. James nodding from a cluster of riders, his beard catching the breeze. Sophia waited near the door, scrubs swapped for a light jacket, her ponytail swaying as she waved him over. The air thrummed with tension, laced with the tang of hot metal and anticipation, the distant hum of the highway underscoring the gravity. They gathered inside the diner, the booth creaking under their weight, waitresses casting curious glances but keeping distance. Coffee steamed in mugs, black and strong, as Ethan laid it out plain. The sharks had eyes everywhere, their leader, a slick operator named Harlan, all tailored suits and veiled threats, plotting retaliation. Not fists, but the slow squeeze of corruption, leaning on local badges, twisting debts into legal nooses. "They think we're relics," Ethan said, voice low, eyes scanning the group like a commander assessing ranks. "But we ride for honor, not headlines. Marcus, here's the line. They cross it, we stand." Nods rippled around the table, hands clasping mugs with quiet resolve. Sophia added her piece, clinical yet fierce. I've seen what their examples do. Broken bodies, shattered lives. We expose them, not fight fire with fire. Nathan listened, the patch on his jacket a subtle weight, grounding him amid the rising tide. When silence fell, all eyes turned to him, Ethan's gaze expectant. "You started this fire," Marcus said softly, his voice carrying the raw edge of gratitude. "What do you say, brother?" Nathan met their stares, the diner's fans whirring overhead like distant rotors, the scent of grease and resolve filling his lungs. Memories of Caleb surged, nights pouring sodas, days watching him slip away. No more. "We don't bend," he replied, words steady as the road. "We ride true. Call the shots. I'm in." A murmur of approval rose, hands slapping shoulders. The circle tightening like a vow renewed. As they spilled back into the sun, plans sketched in low tones, scouts to track Harlan's moves, alliances with old contacts who valued justice over coin. The convoy formed organically, engines stirring to life in a building crescendo. Nathan mounted a borrowed bike from James, the seat familiar yet thrilling, throttle twisting under his grip as they rolled out. Dust billowed behind, the horizon calling with the promise of confrontation, not in violence, but in the unyielding light of loyalty. For Nathan, it was redemption's edge, a promise kept, family claimed, thunder building to wash clean the shadows of the past. The road ahead twisted, but with brothers at his flanks he rode without fear, the wind whispering of legacies forged in fire. The desert wind howled like a chorus of forgotten oaths as the convoy cut through the shimmering heat waves, engines thundering in unison along the cracked ribbon of Route 17. Nathan gripped the handlebars of James's borrowed Harley, the vibration humming through his bones like a second heartbeat, syncing with the pack's relentless rhythm. Dust trailed behind them in swirling veils, the sun a merciless eye overhead, baking the sagebrush into brittle whispers. Ahead, the Crossroads diner faded into a mirage, replaced by the stark outline of a derelict warehouse on the town's ragged edge. Neutral ground turned battleground, where Harlan's sharks had slunk to regroup. The air thickened with the scent of scorched earth and tension, chrome flashing like drawn blades in the glare. Ethan signaled from the lead bike, a sharp cut of his arm, pulling the Vipers into a wide arc around the structure. Tires crunched over gravel, engines cutting to a low growl as they dismounted. A wall of leather and resolve forming without a word. Marcus flanked Nathan, his steps steadier now, the bandage on his arm a pale flag of survival. "This is it," he murmured, voice low against the wind's sigh. "No running today." Sophia rode pillion on Daniel's bike, her jacket zipped tight, eyes scanning the shadows with the precision of someone who'd stitched too many wounds from needless wars. She dismounted gracefully, falling in beside Nathan, her presence a quiet anchor amid the rising storm. "Remember," she said, hand brushing his arm, "truth's our weapon, let it cut clean." The warehouse loomed, its corrugated walls scarred by years of neglect, rusted doors creaking in the breeze like hesitant confessions. Inside, dim light filtered through cracked panes, illuminating a circle of suited figures. Harlan at the center, his tailored jacket out of place amid the dust motes, flanked by two enforcers whose bulks strained against cheap shirts. They turned as the Vipers entered, boots echoing off concrete floors slick with oil stains, the air heavy with the tang of stale cigarette smoke and frayed nerves. Harlan's smile was a thin slash, eyes flicking over the group like a predator sizing up prey. "Well, if it isn't the Relic Club," he drawled, leaning against a crate stamped with faded warnings. "Come to play hero for your junkie friend? Debts don't vanish with a parade." Ethan stepped forward, his scar a stark line in the half-light, voice steady as forged steel. "We're not here for games, Harlan. Marcus's debt, it's paid, in full, by the club. But your threats, they end now. We've got witnesses, records, your loans twisted into chains that break more than wallets." He tossed a folder onto the crate, papers spilling like accusations, affidavits from old contacts, timestamps of shakedowns, proof of Harlan's reach into pockets that should stay clean. The nurse's clinic logs, anonymized but damning, detailed the fallout, broken lives funneled through emergency doors. Sophia's doing, her quiet network of allies weaving the net. Harlan's enforcers shifted, unease rippling through their stances, but the man himself laughed, a hollow bark that echoed off the rafters. "You think paper scares me? This town's bought and paid for. Badges, judges, the works." But his eyes darted, betraying the crack in his armor. Nathan felt the circle tighten behind him, James's hand on his shoulder a silent vow, Alexander's bulk a looming shadow. No fists clenched, no weapons drawn, just the unyielding weight of men who'd chosen loyalty over leverage. Nathan spoke then, his voice cutting through the tension like a cool draft, the patch on his jacket catching a stray beam of light. "I've poured drinks for men like you, slick talk, empty promises. Watched them drag good souls under, but this ends because we say so, not for show but for the ones who can't ride anymore." He thought of Caleb, the ghost in his trailer, the brother whose fall had taught him the cost of looking away. Harlan's gaze met his, and for a flicker something human stirred, regret perhaps, or the echo of his own lost oaths. The standoff hung, thick as the dust settling around them, broken only by the distant wail of a siren, local badges tipped off by the Viper's quiet calls. Harlan's face paled, the folder's contents burning in his periphery. His enforcers backed toward a side door, murmurs of retreat slurring into the gloom. "This ain't over," Harlan spat, but his voice lacked bite, shoulders slumping, as reality coiled around him like the serpent on Nathan's patch. He gathered the papers, stuffing them into his jacket, and slunk out with his men, the warehouse door banging shut behind them like a gavel's fall. Silence bloomed, then shattered with low exhales, hands clasping in grips of quiet triumph. Outside, the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and crimson, the convoy's engines stirring like awakened guardians. Marcus pulled Nathan aside, eyes shining with unshed tears. "You stood with us, like one of our own from the start." Ethan nodded, clapping his back, the group forming a loose circle amid the cooling bikes, the wind carrying away the warehouse's stale breath. Sophia lingered close, her smile soft in the golden light. "You did good back there. Caleb would have been proud." Nathan's throat tightened, the patch warm against his chest, a bridge from loss to legacy. No violence had scarred the day. Justice had come poetic, through words and wills unbroken, proving that honor's thunder drowned out corruption's whisper. As they mounted up, the road unfurling toward twilight's embrace, Nathan throttled forward, the Harley responding with a roar that matched his renewed pulse. The Vipers flanked him, brothers not by blood, but by the fire of promises kept. Dust rose in farewell to the warehouse, the horizon beckoning with endless possibility. In this cynical sprawl of forgotten roots, one free drink had summoned a tide that washed clean the deepest scars, forging a family from the ashes of solitude. The engines sang into the dusk, legacies riding eternal, silent courage echoing long after the echoes faded. Thank you for riding with us through this tale of brotherhood and redemption. If it touched your heart, please subscribe for more stories that honor the quiet strength within us all.